California has passed over a dozen new housing laws that affect ADUs, which let you build homes in your backyard, convert part of your home into an apartment. One of the laws, just to give you a little taste, we're going to talk about with this guy, because this is an Amnesty unpermitted ADU. Even though there's a garage door on the front, inside you've got a kitchenette, you've got a bathroom. It's very habitable. And so that's been hard to make legal in the past. And AB 2533 is a bill that's going to clarify how you can take an existing unpermitted unit like the one I'm standing in and turn it into a legal official ADU safely and soundly. The bill's going to do 4 big things, and we're going to go through all of that in this video, along with a dozen other California housing laws that all touch on ADUs and mean we're going to see more and more ways to get ADUs in your backyard or to convert part of your house into an apartment. Does that look a little bit like it might be a conversion? The curb has a cut in it, like that used to be a driveway up to what looks like it used to be a 1-car garage. Now there's a little door. The front door's over here, so what's this one for? No narking, but if you happen to have an unpermitted ADU or JADU, then AB 2533 is a bill that might make a big difference. It's gonna make a bunch of different changes. For one, it's really clear that cities should use health and safety code to determine if a building is substandard, not building code. So if you've got an ADU that was built in like 1990, instead of requiring you to bring it up to the building code to today's standard, they're just gonna look and say, is this safe? A good example is like today's building code would require the roof to be strong enough to support solar panels eventually. That's important, but it's not a health and safety issue that you need to spend tens of thousands of dollars bringing the roof up to building code compliance to make it a safe unit to live in, right? This bill also asks cities and counties to provide a whole checklist of all the things that they're going to want to see in order to give you a permit for a previously built unpermitted ADU or JADU. And the cities and counties are going to inform homeowners that you can hire third-party inspectors, confidential. They'll come see your home and let you know, is this ready to get permitted? What are the costs that would be entailed? And they do not report you to the city. And then lastly, I really like, this bill has a little provision that says if you don't need any new infrastructure, then there shouldn't be any impact fees, connection fees, or capacity charges. Anytime you can save a little bit of money, that's gonna make a big difference. Now, we're gonna go through over a dozen other California housing laws and how they make it easier to build ADUs in your backyard or turn part of your house into an apartment. Let's dive into the details back at the library. Welcome to my humble abode. I've been busy going through all of the legislation this year, all of the housing bills that I think might affect accessory dwelling units. It's another big year for housing where a lot of new housing laws passed. There's specific ADU bills that are all about accessory dwelling units or junior accessory dwelling units. And then there's also general housing laws. And now I'm starting to see more and more that the general housing laws are overlapping with ADUs. And so we're going to go through and do deep dives on specific laws that really affect ADUs or JADUs. And then we're going to do a bit of a speed round through some bigger housing laws that also affect ADUs because they affect impact fee timing. They affect who can build to 2 stories by changing the definition of major transit stop. So we're going to talk about all those laws with ADUs as our specific lens. The next heavy hitter on the list is SB 1211. This bill is a whopper. Now, it's going to be more about multifamily dwellings. So if you have a single family dwelling, you could do an ADU, internal conversion, a detached ADU, and a JADU, all on one property, right? If you have a multifamily dwelling, not multifamily zoning, but just a multifamily dwelling, then you have a whole different set of rules. If you had 2 existing units in one structure or more, you could build 2 detached ADUs. They've revised that this year, and now, starting in January 2025, you can build 1 detached ADU per existing unit. So if you've got a duplex, then you get to build 2 detached ADUs, just like before. If you've got a 3-unit property, then you get to add 3 detached ADUs. If you got 4 existing, you get to do 4 ADUs, all the way up to a maximum of 8 ADUs. Now, if you're proposing multifamily structures on your property, you still only get to do 2 detached ADUs. They have to already be existing. Additionally, this law tweaks the definitions around required parking replacement, so there's fewer replacement requirements. This bill also makes it super clear, this was already HCD's interpretation, but this bill restates you can do these detached ADUs in addition to converting a certain percentage of the interior space into interior conversion ADUs. And they've clarified the definition of livable space so that it includes like common rooms and any kind of enclosed space that's not part of an existing private unit. That means if you've got an 8-unit property, you could potentially build 8 detached ADUs and convert interior space to create 2 interior conversion ADUs. So for a total of 10 ADUs where there was an 8-unit property before. Realistically, most properties aren't going to accommodate that because you still have to like follow setback rules and stuff. So most properties you're not going to be able to do, 10 ADUs on an 8 ADU property. But the few places where it does pencil and make sense, that's going to get priced into the market pretty quickly, and those properties will grow, right? We're going to get new housing. I expect this bill to get a lot more attention because those few bigger projects will attract a lot of media attention and neighborhood attention. And so I do want to watch this space and see how SB 1211 actually develops, because it's not what we traditionally think of as an accessory dwelling unit. It's like kind of becoming one of the primary drivers on a multifamily property. It's really intriguing. It mirrors some of the projects we've seen down in San Diego, where there, if you deed restrict an ADU for affordable, then you get to build an extra ADU at market rate, and you get to kind of go as high as you want. There is no cap, although 16 is kind of one of the largest projects I've seen down there too. So it's interesting. Lots of interesting stuff happening in multifamily ADUs. We'll continue watching this space. Hey, before we get too much farther, I'm going to plow through a lot of housing law this year that I think affects ADUs, but I want to be super clear. This is a work in progress, and I'm not a lawyer. I'm not giving you advice for your specific situation, but you should definitely get professional legal advice. You should hire professional contractors when you're building, and you should take all of this stuff really seriously. I'm just a guy on YouTube who's obsessed with housing. If you want to read the actual law and like see it for yourself, check out the video description below where there's links to every law we talk about and my notes on them. It's just my personal notes, kind of exploring the topic. It's got a lot of question marks in there because these are questions I go to other professionals with. So without further ado, let's go into some more ADU rules. Next, we're going to talk about SB 1077, which is about the coastal zone. Senator Blakespear put this bill through, and it got a little watered down as the year progressed, but it's still a really powerful piece of legislation. Oh, watered down. That's a good ocean pun, huh? Okay, 1077 is a short bill, but the context is really long. So the shortest version is it's been hard to know what the process to get an ADU permit is in the coastal zone, and in the future it will be less hard. And in between those 2 points in time, there will be a public hearing where I'll need your help to go and advocate for the best possible policy, which will allow us to build ADUs and JADUs in parts of the coastal zone where it won't have an environmental impact and where it won't change anybody's access to the beach at all. It's just common sense. We should allow for ADUs, especially conversion ADUs, without a big complicated coastal zone process. The actual detail, just so you understand how it works, there's the California Coastal Commission, which oversees this big map of California's coastline, and it's in charge of protecting the coastline and access to that coastline for all Californians. The way that it works, though, is that it's a lot of different regions. It's a really long coastline. So there's different LCPs, local coastal programs, that govern each of those areas and have their own kind of governing body. Some of the LCPs have been pretty chill about the ADU process, and then other LCPs have made it exceptionally opaque and complicated. The California Coastal Commission has previously kind of said, hey, this is what you should do, but some of the LCPs ignore that completely. When people hear this, they sometimes think like, why are you trying to build on the beach? That doesn't seem like a really safe place to put ADUs. The coastal zone actually includes a lot of urban land. So places like Venice Beach in Los Angeles, Solana Beach, these are like upscale urbanized neighborhoods or suburban neighborhoods. and they already have houses. They already have huge surface area parking lots along the beach, stuff like that. And so what we want is a local coastal program that says, hey, if you're converting parts of existing homes into ADUs, this is a no-brainer. If you're adding new structures, then you got to follow some rules, that kind of thing. And if you're out in the boonies, like, we want to protect that, like all of the things that make sense, right? So, but this is primarily about infill density. That's not a sexy word. This is primarily about adding homes to places where there are already homes, and usually doing it through interior conversions. And we just want clarity. So that's what this bill does. It requires the CCC to work with the HCD, that's Housing and Community Development, to put forth a program and a process that the LCPs can adopt. There will be a public hearing. Like and subscribe, and I'll keep you up to date about when you can get involved in that process and how we can get the best outcome possible for ADUs in the coastal zone. Okay, this is a very short bill. The whole bill is just like this section down here. And what it says is JADU ordinances should be CEQA exempt. I guess there was a small problem in how the code was written for ADUs, where technically, somebody could have made an environmental complaint when a city adopts an ordinance to allow for JADUs. Such a California story. Doesn't matter. JADU ordinances are now CEQA exempt is the takeaway from that. Also, that's related to something else that happened this year. It's a law that passed last year, but we rechaptered all of the ADU rules. So if you have old links to the old code, they've all moved around to new parts of the government code. I will put a link in the description below with the proper places to look, provided by Casita Coalition. And it's a great document, and don't get confused if all the ADU links you used to have are broken. Here are the new ones. All right, now I think we're gonna move into like speed round mode. So SB 1123 Caballero. This is a cleanup bill for last year's SB 687, I think. Let me check my notes. SB 684. All right, I'm so close. SB 684 is meant to help us make more starter homes by streamlining projects under 10 units when they meet certain conditions. And this bill says, hey, ADUs don't count toward that 10-unit total. It also cleans up a bunch of other stuff. But importantly for ADUs, you'll see more ADUs popping up on these small starter home developments. AB 2553, Assemblymember Friedman has changed and specified the definition of major transit stop. So this affects ADUs in a really specific way. If you're within half a mile of a major transit stop, you can build up to 18 feet, and therefore 2 stories. The old definition for major transit stop said that it had to have buses every 15 minutes. It's called a headway. Now the headway is 20 minutes. So that expands the number of bus stops that qualify, even in this kind of post-pandemic world where most headways have suffered. It has a lot of great impacts for multifamily development and affordable housing development. It also lowers impact fees related to traffic. But the way it really helps ADUs is that more single-family homes are close enough to a major transit stop so that they can build 18 feet instead of 16 feet. That's a win for ADUs. Thanks, Assemblymember Friedman. Next, we're going to talk about Prop 33 and Prop 34, which aren't legislation. They're actually ballot measures that all the voters got to vote on in the November election. Prop 33 was suggesting that rent control go down to the city level instead of being a thing that the state could affect. And in my opinion, it was executed in a way that was very scary because NIMBY cities could weaponize their local rent control measures and say things like, oh, if you have an ADU, you can never raise the rent again, and the state would just never be able to do anything about it, the way it was written. That was pretty scary. That proposition lost, and actually it's lost 3 times. Like, similar rent control measures have lost 3 times since I've been watching this space. And what's crazy is the same organization spends tens and tens of millions of dollars every time to get one of these rent control props on the ballot. And so I always felt like another version of that rent control proposition might come forward. And it's executed in such a chaotic way that it really empowers NIMBY cities, and that's scary. Prop 34 did pass. Prop 34 basically makes it so that that organization can no longer fund housing ballot measures. It can't spend all of its healthcare money on these housing ballot measures anymore. And so I expect to see fewer rent control props in the future on the statewide ballot initiatives. Rent control does scare some homeowners away from renting out their ADU or building one in the first place. And so having a really chaotic environment where every city gets to set its own rules with no limits would have been highly detrimental to the ADU movement. And taking away that threat that keeps bringing it up, in my mind, is worth adding to this list as an update. It is highly unlikely that rent control will just keep coming back on the statewide ballot. AB 2580, this is one of the bills from Assemblymember Wicks. It's about historic designations and annual progress reports. Doesn't sound very exciting. I'm excited. It's about historic designations for all housing, but let's talk about how it affects ADUs. If you're trying to build an ADU in a historic designation, you are subject to some extra rules. Those rules have to fit certain conditions. They have to be objective and blah, blah, blah. There are extra rules. And I have met homeowners who, when they learn about the requirements for their ADU in a historically designated area, they get scared because it seems like it's going to add a lot of frustration, cost, or time to their project. And they abandon the project. The reason this is a little weird is because there's not like one streamlined type of historic designation in California. There's a bunch of them. And nobody's really tracking them all in one place. This bill just says, hey, cities and counties, every year you have to submit an annual progress report about housing anyway. You already have to do that. Add a list of all of your historic designated sites to that progress report and let us know when you deny a permit in one of those historic designations. There's also some like breakdowns and cleanup about the annual progress report data where it'll list out a lot more subcategories in all the denied permits. And this is an interesting bill for a lot of reasons, but it will touch ADUs in that small way because you can build ADUs in historic zones, but sometimes the historic zone kind of challenges the ADU budget and project timeline. SB 937 is about impact fee timing. This is, again, a more important bill for large development projects that sometimes have $1 million impact fee and take like 10 years. If the city charges that impact fee at the beginning of the project, a market rate developer's got to shell out $1 million, and they probably borrowed that money, so they're paying interest and carrying costs, right? All through the long, years-long process of building the project. And this law says, hey, cities can only charge that impact fee when they issue a certificate of occupancy or do the final inspection if there is no certificate of occupancy. That's great news for those larger projects because they'll get cheaper and we'll be able to make housing more affordable. It's also good because you get to piggyback on their coattails. If you were building an ADU above 750 square feet and you had to pay some impact fees, then those impact fees should only be charged at the end, at the final inspection. If you're borrowing out of a HELOC, you don't have to take that money out until the end of the project instead of the beginning. So, common sense reform. Good job, Senator Wiener. I was going to talk about AB 2023 because it like strengthens HCD and HCD enforces ADU rules, but it really doesn't have anything to do with ADUs. We're skipping it. You've got AB 2729 from Assemblymember Patterson. So this extends residential entitlements to 18 months. So if you had gotten a permit before January 1st, 2024, and it was going to expire, this extends it a little bit. It's not going to affect ADUs a lot. Let's skip it. Skip it. AB 1893 is about builder's remedy. This is really cool. I should do a whole video about builder's remedy. But basically, if your city or county does not have a compliant housing element, then a developer can kind of just use the builder's remedy to proceed with a project as if it had received a permit, because the city has lost the ability to deny permits by being out of compliance. And usually when I talk to lawyers, they say, Ryan, ADUs are ministerial anyway. Why do you care about this law? Like, you don't need builder's remedy. You already have ministerial permits. But I know a lot of projects where the city is just delayed, even though it's a ministerial project. And so to me, it looks kind of like, is there a way that a homeowner could use builder's remedy to build an ADU or an SB9 unit? Maybe. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not your lawyer. But if you want to see a list of the jurisdictions that are out of compliance, YIMBY Law and YIMBY Action maintain a list. I'll put a link in the video description below, and you can look up your jurisdiction. If you happen to be out of compliance, like if your city is tardy in its housing element compliance, maybe it's worth speaking to an attorney about whether that opens up some builder's remedy option for you to get around a sticky permitting process. SB 1037 is one of my favorites from this year, and I'm not clear on how it'll affect ADUs, so we'll talk about the theory here. This is a law that, how do I say this? When a city F's around with housing law, then they can be fined between $10,000 and $50,000 per unit per month for the thing that they've delayed. And that's pretty awesome. It's adding fiscal teeth to the existing process of enforcement. Watching the actual floor hearings, it sounds like the intent is to use it after long legal proceedings. So, for example, there's this city that tried to self-certify its housing element instead of getting the state to certify it, and they blocked some affordable housing projects, and they've just been kind of housing monsters. They went to court, they lost, but even after that, they're still just not doing the thing. They're not administering the permit, and so this would allow fines, big fines. And the sweetest part of this is that the money doesn't go to some general fund at the state. The money goes into an affordable housing fund specifically for the city that was obstructing the housing. I love it. So it seems like they only want to use this at the end of the long legal proceeding, like in the example that I'm thinking of. Having said that, the law seems to be written to include ministerial permits with shot clocks. So like when you ask for a permit for your ADU or an SB9, there's 60 days on that shot clock. It appears that if they miss that deadline, that would open them up to receiving a writ from the court, and then after that being fined. And that could be pretty interesting, but I don't know if the AG has the appetite for that or if a private citizen can do it. Like I said, I haven't followed down this rabbit hole all the way through. If you have questions about it, please let me know and we'll talk about it. SB 450, this is an SB9 law, so I'll do a whole separate video about SB9, but basically SB9 is alive and well. They've amended it in several ways to clean up a lot of different things. One is that there's a 60-day shot clock now, like with ADU permits. The city or county can't just slow roll your application. If you reject a permit, you have to give a full list of comments that allows the applicant to remedy the comments and then get the application. Like it's not just like a no, it's no until you do these things. If the city or county misses that 60-day shot clock, the permit is deemed approved according to this bill. There are new limits on the SB9 zoning standards. So a thing that happened when SB9 passed, cities started adopting zoning ordinances that only applied to SB9 units. So they're like, your main house can be 3-story mega mansion, but your SB9 unit has to be less than 800 square feet, and it has to have like a little hedge around it. That's the real one, the hedge. I didn't make that up. The new code says, hey, you got to treat SB9 units the same way as you treat all the other primary structures in your zoning ordinance. And it is very clear that this applies in all cities, including charter cities, and the AG will appeal the case that happened in Los Angeles County to show that SB9 is enforceable everywhere, especially with this cleaned up bill language. As these laws actually come into effect, I will be doing videos and putting them in a playlist here, and you can watch that if you want to see how the theory actually turns into reality. It's super important. Devil's in the details. Thank you for watching. Let's build some housing.